So, this is in continuation to the previous lecture on water harvesting and water use technologies in pre-colonial India or ancient India. And so, in the previous lecture we focused on east and northeast, and in this lecture I will be focusing on west, north and south. So, to begin with west and the famous state of Rajasthan, the beautiful Jhalara system or the step well irrigation system that is still prevalent in Rajasthan today in Bikaner, Jodhpur, Jaisalmer. So, like Rajasthan, it is an arid region, west it is mostly arid and semi-arid. So, a near rainless desert. But then we find that how different crops including jowar, bajra and different other crops were cultivated in Rajasthan through the maintenance of these old water harvesting mechanisms and techniques. For example, there is a local dialect called Chahi. So, Chahi means a land irrigated by wells. Now, if we see the villages in Bikaner or Jodhpur for that matter, we will find that every household had a well. So many wells, series of wells, network of wells in Rajasthan, mainly in the districts of Jaisalmer, Jodhpur and Bikaner. So, there is a particular report, an account by Brake and Brockman which was published in 1908 that provides a comprehensive coverage of well irrigation in different parts of Rajasthan. And it also talks about the use of various water lifts or water lifting devices for lifting water from these wells. As I talked about these jhalaras or step wells. So, this is a unique system which was developed in Rajasthan, and it is a rectangular structure with so many it is a tired structure, and jhalaras were meant to collect subterraneous seepage from the upstream reservoir, and it ensured water supply for religious rites, for royal ceremonies and for many other important functions, public functions as well. So, I mean Jodhpur for example, still it has 8 jhalaras, 8 big and extensive jhalaras, and one of the oldest jhalara is known as the Mahamandir jhalara in Jodhpur, where you can still visit and take a look. So, apart from wells or step wells, we also have tank irrigation in Rajasthan, and Rajasthan again is very much well networked by water reservoirs or tanks. So, for example, there are even now 35 tanks in Jodhpur, and Jaisalmer is famous for Gadisar, Gulab Sagar, Govind Sagar, Sudharar tanks. But unfortunately, what is happening in Jaisalmer today is that for example, we do not have this Gadisar tank functioning anymore, and previously while Jaisalmer the entire water supply used to depend on tank irrigation or tanks, now there has been a change from tanks to groundwater. So, now the entire area or entire Jaisalmer, it depends on groundwater supply for meeting the basic requirements, including drinking water, other amenities and also agriculture. So, there has been a change or there has been a transformation from the use of a tank as the major or the pivotal water harvesting structure to the increasing reliance and dependence on groundwater. Similarly, this famous tanks Jasolai, Baginada and Rangolai, so they are no more there in Bikaner. So, they have been wiped off from the map of Bikaner, which is really an unfortunate story. So, apart from tanks, we have tankas. These are the small water harvesting structures, but mainly used for drinking water. And so chunams or lime was used I mean so that the water did not get contaminated. So, that was the indigenous mechanism which was used for the maintenance and the storage of drinking water in the tankas. And apart from that, we also have small scale dams, not large scale dams like the Farakka barrage, or for that matter the Kosi dam or the Hirakud dam, but small dams that had minimum interruption on the flow of the river. So, we during the pre-colonial times, ancient times, there were dams on the Luni and the Chuhia rivers. And we also have artificial lakes. So, two very important lakes called the Jaswant Sagar and the Sardar Samnad lake are still there. And Rajasthan also depended on rainwater harvesting. So, again we have an extensive system of the kunds. So, the picture of there are the pictures of kunds here. So, kunds are kind of a excavation on the ground, which was also covered with a lead, so that the stored water could be protected from contamination. And we had another system called toba. So, toba again how water was stored in natural depression. So, there was also the prevalence of elaborate systems inside forts. For example, if you just take the example of Chittor Fort. So, Chittor Fort itself, the inside of Chittor Fort, it consists of 84 water bodies, and of which 22 are existing today currently. So, this is a snapshot of the water wisdom of Jodhpur. So, you can see an integrated water system. So, how the canals, the barns, the wells and the tanks, they are all embedded and integrated as a single system for irrigation purpose in Jodhpur, and also for other purposes including the supply of drinking water and all that. So, you can find the name of these different canals and also the talabs, some of which still exist. And so, this is known as the water wisdom of Jodhpur, because how they were not depending on particular or specific water structures, but how they concentrated on integrating these different water structures for a continuous supply of water for the purpose of both agriculture and drinking water. So, this is another very interesting diagram on the water web of Udaipur. Udaipur is also a very famous site for so far as water bodies are concerned. So, it is a beautiful waterscape, and so if you see that this is again a complex intricate web, where we find this, that there are three major waterscapes: the Pichola, Fatehsagar and Udaysagar, and these three are again connected with each other, right, because the Sisarma string, it impounded water to Pichala, and then the Bari tank, the Chota Mother and the Bara Mother, it fed Fatehsagar, and then the Aha river, the major river in Udaipur. So, one of the major rivers in Udaipur called Ahar, apart from Moram. So, the Aha river, it fed Udaysagar. But then if you can see how these three waterscapes are connected to each other. So, this particular structure, or the way it was designed, it was extremely vital for the lifeline of Udaipur, but unfortunately we do not have this system anymore. So, now coming to Gujarat, like Rajasthan, in Gujarat also we have these step wells, but they are not called jalars, but in Gujarat in local dialect these step wells are called bhav or bhavadi. So, again there is a history of the traditional wells and tanks in Gujarat, and in the folk songs and the folklores of Gujarat, we have the mention of these wells and the different functionings of these wells, how it was very much connected to the social life and social fabric of the state of Gujarat. So, apart from wells and tanks, there was also the kunds again that particular kind of an artificial excavation or a kind of a pond with a lead. And along with Kund, also in Gujarat there was a prevalence of Virdas. So, Virdas it was a system developed by one of the tribal communities called the Maldaris, who were mainly the inhabitants of the Bani pasture land. And Virdas is also a very interesting system, and when we will be discussing, we will be entering into the debate regarding whether the pre-colonial system, the water harvesting systems were absolutely environmentally benign and socially accommodative or not, compared to the colonial hydraulic design and management, then we will learn about Virdas in greater detail. But for now it is important for us to know that we find numerous Virdas even today. And these Maldaris, they are also not only involved in the excavation of Virdas, but they are also involved in the repair and maintenance of Virdas. So, it is a system absolutely again owned and managed by the Maldaris of the Bani pasture land. So, Madhya Pradesh is famous for the Haveli system. So, Haveli is a kind of an agricultural practice which is totally based on water harvesting and runoff farming. So, Haveli again fortunately is still very much prevalent in the different villages of Madhya Pradesh. And if we again focus on the Sanchi area, the Sanchi hill. So, 3 tanks are still there. So, and which were excavated much earlier. It dates back to the 3rd century BC, and the mention of these tanks are there in the Jatakas, and these tanks were connected to the Betwa river. Then another interesting thing is the PAT system. I do not know how to pronounce, like PAT or PAT whatever, but the PAT system maybe. So, water climbing up hill slopes to irrigate fields. So, this was a seeming defense of the law of gravity, because how could water climb up hill slopes to irrigate fields. So, the PAT system, it was a system again very interestingly developed by the Bhils, the Bhil tribals of Madhya Pradesh, through which they actually could make water climb up to the hill slopes. And so, the PAT, so you can again see the illustration here, and you can the technicalities are available. I mean the technicalities are reflected in the illustration itself. So, where we find that how water from the stream flowing through the hills were diverted to the irrigation fields. So, Maharashtra also numerous artificial reservoirs and the very famous Fad irrigation system. So, Fad irrigation system, it was also dependent on the Bandhara. So, the Bandhara, this kind of a structure for water storage. So, so the Bandharas on the rivers used to divert water for agricultural use. So, you can see that the main channel or the main canal connected to the river, and how it brought water to these Bandharas, and then finally how water was stored in these Bandharas, and again how through the outlet channel water was diverted to the agrarian fields. So, this was the famous PAT system prevalent in Maharashtra. And apart from that, Goa is famous for its Khazana system, again a unique coastal estuarine agro ecosystem. Why it is called an estuarine agro ecosystem? Because like several other water harvesting techniques, Khazana is also a system that integrates forestry, vegetation, ecology, river and all that together. So, and also this is very important so far as the specificities of the Goan climate topography are concerned. So, in Goa in the Khazana system we also find the use of the sluice gates, and these gates were very important. The construction of the sluice gates were very important in order to protect the fields from saline water, because being situated on a coastal region, it was important that saline water and fresh water did not get mixed, okay, or intermingled. And so it also has a social history, very interesting social history, by which we see how these sluice gates were operated to regulate fishing activities in these areas. And Goa is bunds, rather bunds are known as the greatest community asset for Goa. And these bunds were constructed of eco-friendly materials like mud, straw, bamboo, branches, twigs, and there were also mangroves on the bunds, so for greater protection. So again, as I mentioned, that it's a kind of an integrated agro ecosystem, where we find that all these very important elements of ecology were integrated together. Yes, now coming to north, I will not very much focus or emphasize on north while I will be talking about water harvesting techniques or mechanisms in ancient India. The reason being that Delhi or Uttar Pradesh or the entire northwest frontier province, it is very important to focus on northwest frontier province so far as medieval India was concerned, because all the very important water harvesting techniques came up during the Sultanate and the Mughal times. So, for example, extensive systems like the Sakya, use of Sakya, Saduf, Qanat and all that, these actually emerged during the rule of the medieval rulers or the medieval monarchs under the Sultanate and the Mughal dynasty. So I would be mainly covering a lot on north and northwest frontier province, while I will be discussing medieval India. But so far as ancient India is concerned, of course, Delhi is also Delhi had the Baolis or the step wells, and there is an area called the Braj Bhumi, which is the kind of a north central part of Delhi, and the mention of Braj Bhumi is there in the Skanda Puran, and we get to know that this particular area had very big or large reservoirs, both Kacha Talab and Pakka Talab. So the famous reservoirs, some of which even exist today, like the Gopal Sagar and the Roop Sagar. So coming to Uttar Pradesh, again tanks, well, minor streams or nalas, embankments across nalas. These are some of the oldest water use techniques that were there in UP. And apart from that, we have unique indigenous specific UP system, which is known as the Lat. So Lat means this long straight covered embankment. And then of course, the Johars of Kandla. So the Johars were also used as fertilizer plants. So that is why they are so famous, and this is an illustration again from the particular book called Dying Wisdom. So you see again nalas and barns and canals, and the distributed, how it was interlinked to the Yamuna river and the Yamuna canal system. And but unfortunately it is it is still there, but it has decayed like anything. So coming to Punjab, we all know that it is the land of the 5 rivers, the Indus and its 5 branches or channels and streams. So well irrigation was very much there in the Bees Satluj area, and in Punjab also, like Bengal and Orissa, we find irrigation using flood waters. So if not overflow irrigation, but at least flood waters was used, it was tapped, and so the alluvium was retained, and flood waters were very much used to irrigate the paddy fields mainly. And of course, there was no perennial canal irrigation system in Punjab. So, later when we will be focusing on colonial hydrology, we will see how the old well irrigation system, how it got replaced by the perennial canal irrigation system, and what had been the impact or implications of that on the ecology and society of Punjab. So, Haryana again there is a local dialect, local term called Khadar, which means the active flood plains in the Ghaggar basin. So, Ghaggar and also other rivers like the Markanda, Saraswati and Yamuna, and Haryana is also famous for its Abi tank irrigation, again an integrated system that integrates the tanks and wells and canal and finally connected to the river. So, cones and bunds exist in Haryana till today, though the numbers have been decreased. So, coming to south, very important region and extremely famous for its series of tanks. So, the extensive tank irrigation system and richly loaded with also cultural history, social and cultural history. Because again when we will be moving on to the debate about ecologically malign versus ecologically benign, socially accommodative versus socially disruptive. So, we will be talking about the tank irrigation system of South India. So, a lot of interesting researches have been conducted on the tank irrigation system of South India. So, tanks they were known as kere in the local language and in Kannada, I guess. And we have this series of tanks in Bijapur, Shimoga, Kadur, Bellary. So, Bellary like 280 tanks have been mapped, and Hassan, Tumkur, Kolar, Bangalore. Bangalore is known as the city of tanks. And apart from Kere, so Kere are the big tanks, the large tanks. There are the minor tanks called the Ara Kere. So, the Niti Marga inscription of 9th century talks about these minor tanks or the Ara Kere. And there are other terminologies like Devi Kere or Deva Gere or Deva Ra Kere. So, that talks about the association between tanks and temples in South India. So, the tanks and the history of tanks and the history of temples are very much interconnected, so far as South India is concerned. So, we have these terminologies as well, and so as I mentioned these tanks are literally loaded with cultural meanings, cultural history and cultural manifestation. So, apart from tanks there were dikes and anikats and bunds or kate which where water was stored for the daily needs, washing, clothing, bathing and all that. So, Andhra Pradesh also series of dikes called kolvas across the Tungabhadra river basin, and also a series of tanks, bunds or embankments, artificial tanks. And Kerala is famous for its wet irrigation. So, wet irrigation fed by channels branching out from anikats, right, and few dams, even little large scale dams were built during the rule of the Pandyas. So, during Pandyan rule we have this famous Pandyan Kal connected to 11 anikats. So, you can imagine how extensive the system was. So, apart from the Pandyan Kal, there is also the Puthen dam, and of course, like Madhya Pradesh and Karnataka, Kerala also had numerous tanks, and numerous tanks have been found out and identified and mapped in South Travancore, and specifically in this region of South Travancore, tanks are known as Udnis. So, Udnis are these are not big tanks or large tanks, but they are small tanks, and so like the structure of the tanks is quite different from the structure of tanks in Tamil Nadu or Karnataka. The reason being Kerala it's the topography was quite what to say yes. So, the topography was quite undulated, and unlike Tamil Nadu, it did not have large scale flat space. So, the size of the tanks are seemingly small. compared to Tamil Nadu, Karnataka and Andhra Pradesh. So, finally coming to Tamil Nadu, large areas were fed by rivers like Kaveri, Godavari, Tungabhadra, Noil, Vabani, Amravati, so many major rivers crisscrossing Tamil Nadu. So, again we have this Padugai lands, which were again where these structures, long mud embankments were constructed, very long, so stretching at least 125 kilometers, and these were built during the days of the Chola rule. So, built by the Chola kings on the Kaveri river, and we also have their temporary dams, so which were reconstructed annually, and so these were called Korambus, and very old anecots are there still existing in parts of Tamil Nadu. And again very interestingly, like if we go through some of the works by or researches by environmental historian or water historian like David Moss, we find that there is a relation between the size of water harvesting structure and the importance of its sponsor. So, he says that the size of water harvesting structures reflected the importance of its sponsor. For example, the kings, they actually sponsored these big anecots, the local chiefs they sponsored tanks, and the private individuals they actually sponsored well. So, by looking into the water harvesting structure, you can actually find out the pattern of sponsorship in different parts of Tamil Nadu. So, we also have artificial irrigation in the drought prone areas including Tanjore, and so from the Registers General and Census Commissioner mentions in 1985 that for the most part the soil is naturally poor, and it is irrigation alone which makes the province such a scene of fertility. So, we can understand the importance of irrigation, the divergent system of irrigation, again small scale, cost effective, eco friendly irrigation mechanisms that ensured fertility of Tamil Nadu. So, this is the Grand Anecot which was built by Karikala, 2nd century AD. It is still there, a very big structure. And so, finally, waiting for wisdom to make its way. Okay. So, we can get engaged into a debate whether like is big the best or is small beautiful. So, Joshi he mentioned in 1990 that big dams were very important for independent India, especially during the Nehruvian regime, because they were politician friendly, they still are politician friendly, administration friendly and contractor friendly. This is very important. So, how it benefits the multiple stakeholders including the politicians and the contractors and administration. So, very interestingly there is a kind of a promoter politician nexus in the construction of dams. So, we find that during immediate post independent period, how the different how so many large rivers were immediately dammed, and so many dams were constructed throughout the length and breadth of the country. And unfortunately, the traditional harvesting systems to a great extent were replaced by large hydraulic structure, a thing that actually a phenomena that started since the colonial rule, the colonial regime. But fortunately, again since the 1980s, later part of the 1980s and 1990s, many NGOs and many grassroots organizations and even the government have been to a great extent mobilized. So, many river experts, water experts, they are also involved in the whole affair, where people are actually trying to think about the revival of the community tradition. So, in different parts of India also we find restoration of the different water harvesting techniques and to mobilize this across scales. So, so there are a few success stories which we will definitely cover in this particular course on water, society and sustainability, that help us critically interrogate that big is not always beautiful. It is also important, to believe in the dictum or to believe in the wisdom that small is also beautiful sometimes. Thank you.